Hello everyone. In this session, we will discuss about the structure of DNA. Before that, we will discuss how the structure of DNA was elucidated. So there were so many biochemical investigations about the structure of DNA. The first one was done by Frederick Miescher. So he was actually the first one to carry out a systematic chemical study of the cell nuclei. It was in 1868 and he isolated a phosphorus containing substance and he called it nuclein from the nuclei of pus cells obtained from discarded surgical bandages. He found that this nuclein is having a acidic portion, which is the DNA, and a basic portion, which is the protein. And he also found that similar acidic substance is also found in the heads of sperm cells of salmon fish. So he was able to partially purify the nuclein and study its property, but the structure of DNA was not known until the 1940s. The next experiment is very famous by Frederick Griffith. So he conducted the experiment using the virulent and avirulent strains of pneumococcus. So the pneumococcus, they are having a gelatinous polysaccharide coating, and that coating contains the binding sites through which it recognizes the cell and they infect the cell. It is called the O antigen. Okay, so there is a mutant pneumococci that lacks this coating, and it does not have the enzyme for that is required for this capsule, and they are non-pathogenic and they are called virulent. So the virulent strains are known as S strains because they appear smooth, and the avirulent strains are R strains or rough strains. Okay. So what he did was, in 1928 he injected the mice with a live R strain and a heat killed S strain. So we know R strain is a virulent and the S strain, that is virulent but it is killed. So obviously the mice will not die in this case, but the mice which he injected actually died. So he understood that there was something that contained in the S strains that changed this R strains into virulent strains. He also found that the progeny of the transformed pneumococci were also S strains, so that is, the transformation was permanent. The next experiment was by Oswald D'Avery, Colin MacLeod, and Maclean McCarthy. So this experiment gave the evidence that DNA is the genetic information. So in 1944 they found that the DNA extracted from a S strain, that is a virulent strain of pneumococcus, genetically transformed a non-virulent strain, that is the R strain, into a virulent form. So what they did was, they extracted the DNA from the heat-killed virulent strain, that is the S strain, and they removed all the protein as completely as possible, and they added the DNA to a non-virulent bacteria. And what happened is that by transformation the DNA gained entrance into the non-virulent bacteria, and they were permanently transformed into a virulent strain. So from that observations they concluded that the DNA extracted from the S strain, they carried a inheritable genetic message to that for virulence, and they carried that message to the non-virulent strain. Initially this idea was not accepted because there were protein impurities present in the DNA isolate, and that protein impurities can also be the carrier of genetic information. But that possibility was soon eliminated by next finding, or by the next experiment, that is by Alfred D. Hershey and Martha Chase. So it was in 1952, and they used radioactive phosphorus and radioactive sulfur. So what they did was, we know bacteriophages, they infect the E. coli, Escherichia coli, right? They are coliphages. So they tagged this DNA with radioactive phosphorus, and viral particle, or the viral protein, or the viral coat, that was tagged by radioactive sulfur. So protein contained sulfur and DNA contained phosphorus. So while transformation, only the radioactive phosphorus enters the E. coli, not the radioactive sulfur. So they told that the genetic information, it is carried out by the DNA. The next experiment was by Erwin Chargaff and his colleagues. So this was the most important experiment to the structure of DNA, and it was in 1940s. These experiments came in 1940s. So they actually found out that the four nucleotide bases, adenine, thymine, guanine and cytosine, they occur in different ratios in the DNAs of different organisms, and that the amounts of certain bases, they are closely related. So they made certain conclusions, that is 4 conclusions. So the base composition of DNA varies from one species to another. That is the first conclusion. Second conclusion, that is DNA specimens isolated from different tissues of the same species, they have the same base composition. The third conclusion was, the base composition of the DNA in a given species, they will not change according to the organism's age or its nutritional state or its changing environment. And the last conclusion was, regardless of the species, in all cellular DNA, the number of adenosine residues is equal to the number of thymine residues, and the number of guanosine residues is equal to the number of cytidine residues. That was an important conclusion. From these relationships, we can say that the sum of purine residues equal the sum of pyrimidine residues, that is A plus G is equal to T plus C. So this is called as the Chargaff's rule, and it was also confirmed by other researchers. So this was a key in establishing the 3-dimensional structure of DNA, and it also gave clues about how genetic information is encoded in the DNA and passed from generation to generation. So it was an important discovery. So the next experiment was by Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkins. They actually gave more light to the structure of DNA, that is the helical structure of DNA. So it was done by X-ray diffraction method, and it was in the 1950s. So from the X-ray diffraction method to analyze the DNA fibers, they found that the DNA molecules are helical molecules, and they are having 2 periodicities along their axis. Okay, a primary one of 3.4 angstrom and a secondary one of 34 angstrom. So after this discovery, the problem was to formulate a 3D model for this DNA molecule, so that it will go in account with the X-ray diffraction data and also the Erwin Chargaff's role, and also the other chemical properties of DNA. So this is the X-ray diffraction pattern of the DNA. So the whole problem was solved by the Watson and Crick model. So in 1953, Watson and Crick postulated a 3D model of DNA structure. So In the structure, it consisted of two helical DNA chains wound around a same axis to form a right-handed double helix. The hydrophilic backbones of the deoxyribose and the phosphate groups are on the outside of the helix facing the surrounding water. The sugar molecule, that is the furanose ring of each of the DNA or the deoxyribose, is in the C2 endo conformation. If the purine and pyrimidine bases of both the strands, they are stacked inside the helix, that is they are hydrophobic, and they are nearly planar ring structures very close together and perpendicular to the long axis. So in the Watson and Crick model, the two helical DNA chains, they are wounded around an axis in a right-handed fashion, and the hydrophilic backbones are facing outside the helix. Okay, that is they are hydrophilic, that is they are facing the surrounding water. The furanose, that is the beta furanose ring, will be in the C2 endo conformation, and the purine and pyrimidine bases are stacked inside to the helix, and they are hydrophobic, and they are planar ring structures. Then they are attached very close together, and also they are perpendicular to the long axis. The pairing, the offset pairing of these two strands are creating a major groove and a minor groove in the structure. So the minor groove, they expose the edge of a base pair from which its C1 atoms extend, and the major groove, they expose the opposite edge of each base pair. I'll show the figure later. So there are two strands, right, and each nucleotide base of one strand is paired in the same plane with the base of another strand, that is the complementary base of the another strand. And they also found that the hydrogen bonded base pairs, that is G bonds with C, and the guanine, they bond with cytosine, adenine bond with thymine. So they also found their structure is in accordance with the Chargaff's rule, that is G is equal to C and A is equal to T. And they also found that there are 3 hydrogen bonds between G and C, and only 2 between A and T. The 2 strands are anti-parallel, that is the 5-3- phosphodiester bonds, they run in the opposite direction. And also their structure was in accordance to the Rosalind and Franklin, right? Rosalind Franklin structure, that is the X-ray diffraction experiment. That is, the bases are stacked inside the double helix 3.4 angstrom apart, and the secondary repeat distance of about 34 angstrom was accounted for the presence of 10 base pairs in each complete turn of the double helix. So the vertically stacked base pairs, that is inside the double helix, it is 3.4 angstrom apart, and the secondary repeat distance of about 34 angstrom. In the each complete turn of the double helix, there will be almost 10 base pairs present. In aqueous solution, this structure differs slightly, that is they are having 10.5 base pairs per helical turn. The anti-parallel strands, that is the 2 strands that run anti-parallel, they are complementary to each other, that is their base sequence are not identical, instead they are complementary. So when adenine occurs in one chain, in the opposite chain thymine will occur. If there is cytosine in one chain, in the other one guanine will occur. The DNA double helix, they are held together by 2 forces, that is hydrogen bonding between the complementary base pairs, and the base stacking interactions. So the hydrogen bonding between base pairs, that gives the complementarity between the strands, and also the base stacking interactions, they are largely non-specific with respect to the identity of the stacked bases, but they contribute to the stability of the double helix. So this is how the strands are arranged, that is the complementarity between G and C, 3 hydrogen bond, between A and T, 2 hydrogen bonds. This is the double helical structure of DNA. Here you can see the minor groove and the major groove.